Something unbelievable is happening in real time, something nobody thought they would live to see. And America, the nation that built the world's most advanced aviation system, and the country whose airports once symbolized progress and power, is now watching them collapse terminal by terminal, runway by runway. Delays, outages, failing infrastructure, security chaos. The biggest airports in the United States are crumbling under pressure.
American airports are bracing for chaos, with the Trump administration ordering mass flight cancellations as the government shutdown breaks records for all the wrong reasons. The Federal Aviation Authority has announced it's cutting 10% of air traffic at some of the country's busiest airports. Now, this could amount to 4,000 cancelled flights per day, causing major disruptions as the Thanksgiving holiday period nears. It's all because of the ongoing government shutdown, which has meant air traffic controllers and security staff are being forced to work without pay, with some taking up second jobs to make ends meet.
And while the world assumed America would always be the gold standard, another continent is now stepping into, the spotlight and rewriting the future of air travel, Africa. Across the Atlantic, Africa is doing the exact opposite. While America struggles with aging terminals and outdated systems, Africa is building airports of the future sleek, efficient, digitally connected, and powered by modern transport innovation, where the US is patching broken ceilings and begging for federal funding.
When it comes for vacation, I think there's other places I would rather go.
Africa is constructing new aviation hubs designed for the next 50 years. Nations once written off as developing are now developing aviation models that America is suddenly behind on. It's not just embarrassing, it's historic. The world that once learned aviation from the US is now surpassing it. Travelers are already noticing the shift, airlines are noticing, investors are noticing, and most importantly, Washington knows it can't stop it.
Visitors are even being told by their home countries to take their vacations and money elsewhere.
Do you feel like your friends and family feel comfortable traveling there?
No. Nobody I know back in England or here.
And then the police can take them and just take them to a country outside the States, and then they're not a protected citizen anymore.
For years, Americans believed their airports were symbols of prestige gateways to the world, monuments of prosperity, and proof that the United States stood at the center of global travel and trade. Millions walked through terminals in New York, California, Texas, Illinois, and Georgia expecting efficiency, scale, and innovation. But those once glittering gateways tell a different story now. Delays stretch in 2 hours, broken systems shut down entire terminals, canceled flights ripple across the country, and frustrated passengers sleep next to baggage carousels overflowing with unclaimed luggage. America's aviation pride has become a logistical embarrassment. The collapse didn't happen overnight. It came on slowly, one failing system at a time. Air traffic control networks developed in the 1980s were never upgraded. Runways built for a smaller nation now serve a population of hundreds of millions. Maintenance budgets were cut while passenger numbers surged. Airport expansions were promised but never finished. And while U.S. infrastructure stalled, the world quietly moved forward, especially Africa. The first signs of decline appeared in Atlanta, Chicago, and Los Angeles when severe weather exposed how fragile U.S. aviation infrastructure really was. A snowstorm in one state could strand passengers across the entire country. A lightning strike on a single communications tower could freeze flight operations for hours. What was once considered an occasional inconvenience became a weekly crisis. Airlines blamed airports. Airports blamed federal regulators. Federal regulators blamed underfunding. But the truth was simpler. The United States had stopped investing in the future while other regions poured billions into it. Africa saw an opportunity long before Washington noticed the threat. Countries such as Kenya, South Africa, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Rwanda, and Morocco didn't just expand airports, they reinvented them. Modern terminals ran on automated check-in systems, biometric security screening, digital baggage tracking, aircraft repair facilities powered by renewable energy, and flight management centers connected through high-speed satellite communication. Where America spent money repairing the past, Africa spent money building the future. Yet the true turning point came when major international airlines began shifting their transit hubs from the United States to Africa. New long-range aircraft made direct trans-African flights more efficient, and competitive landing fees attracted carriers from Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. Travelers from China heading to Brazil suddenly found it cheaper and faster to connect through Nairobi or Johannesburg rather than New York or Dallas. Cargo shipments from Germany headed to Latin America rerouted through Lagos and Addis Ababa. Every flight that bypassed America drained billions in airport revenue and tourism spending. Corporate executives tried to warn Washington. They argued that failing airports were not just a transportation problem, they were a national security and economic threat. But in a country polarized by politics, aviation modernization never became a priority. Federal budgets were swallowed by partisan battles and proposals for new terminals or air traffic control centers died in legislative gridlock. Meanwhile, Africa built runways so advanced they could accommodate next-generation supersonic and hydrogen-powered aircraft before the United States had even decommissioned aging terminals. Economic consequences soon followed. When airports began operating at reduced efficiency, passenger spending plummeted, restaurants, hotels, and retail stores inside major U.S. hubs became empty. International corporations rerouted business travel through Africa and the Middle East, where stopovers turned into tourism. American cities that once thrived on global connectivity saw their hotel occupancy rates collapse. Local governments begged Washington for financial support. There was not enough money to save airports and also repair highways, bridges, and power grids at the same time. Then came the final blow. Africa launched the Continental Aviation Alliance. The agreement unified air travel policies across dozens of African nations and eliminated cross-border bureaucracy for airlines. Immigration systems synced, safety regulations were standardized, cargo inspections were harmonized. The entire continent became a seamless aviation zone, something the United States had never achieved even within its own borders due to complex state-federal authority battles. The impact was immediate. Freight companies relocated distribution centers to West and East Africa. Technology firms built innovation labs inside new aerotropolis. Cities rising around modern airports. Even global airlines headquartered outside Africa opened regional offices inside the continent as aviation hubs because it gave them closer access to major emerging markets. American airports, once symbols of international prestige, now struggled to remain relevant. Terminals that once welcomed millions became congested relics of a fading aviation empire. International passengers who once dreamed of landing in the United States now avoided it due to unpredictable flight disruptions and outdated airport experiences. Airline CEOs publicly admitted that routing through Africa saved time and cut costs. Travel influencers promoted Africa's mega airports as the new global crossroads. The United States tried to respond. Federal officials proposed the largest airport modernization bill in U.S. history, but investors were no longer confident. Construction companies demanded guarantees. International lenders offered only high-interest loans. The technology needed to build world-class airports was now mostly patented by Africa and Asia. The era in which the United States set global aviation standards was over-replaced by a world in which America was catching up instead of leading. Inside the terminals, American travelers continued to feel the consequences: endless delays, failing escalators, malfunctioning baggage belts, air conditioning outages, security bottlenecks, and flight cancellations cascading across the nation like dominoes. But outside the terminals, a far more powerful shift was happening. Africa had taken control of the skies. In the race for aviation dominance, the United States didn't just fall behind, it stopped running. The rise of Africa's aviation sector would have been impressive on its own, but what made it transformative and devastating for the United States was how it reshaped global trade. Airports were no longer just places where passengers boarded planes. They became nerve centers of commerce, technology, logistics, and geopolitics. And in this new world, Africa sat at the center while America slipped to the margins. The change started quietly. African nations realized that modern airports could do more than handle flights. They could anchor entire economic ecosystems: warehouses, data centers, cold storage units, drone ports, fintech hubs, luxury hotels, retail districts, aerospace engineering plants, and manufacturing lines sprang up around major terminals. What used to be empty land became bustling aerotropolis cities, economies built around aviation instead of roads or ports. The rest of the world took notice. Cargo carriers from China and India began prioritizing routes through Kenya and Ethiopia for shipping electronics to South America. Pharmaceutical companies from Switzerland routed temperature-sensitive medical supplies through specialized cold storage hubs in Rwanda rather than outdated U.S. facilities. Agricultural exports from Brazil traveled through South Africa before heading to Asian supermarkets. Africa became the relay point for global commerce. Every container that passed through Africa instead of the United States represented not only lost revenue but lost influence. For decades, American airports extracted massive profits. Through landing fees, cargo processing charges, retail concessions, hospitality taxes, and tourism spending. Now, those profits shifted across the Atlantic. Countries that once depended on the United States for opportunities suddenly had a new gateway, and it was closer, cheaper, faster, and more advanced. American corporations noticed before American politicians did. Real estate companies started purchasing land near African hubs. Logistics. Giants moved distribution centers to West Africa instead of Texas. Tech companies launched innovation labs in Nairobi instead of Silicon Valley because that was where international traffic flowed. African cities, once treated as secondary markets, became global business capitals not because the world changed its perception, but because the world changed its flight paths as more cargo flowed through. Africa, new trade routes formed. East African rail networks connected inland mining regions to coastal airports. West African ports synced shipping schedules with airport freight. African airlines coordinated with Asian, Middle Eastern, and European carriers to create global express delivery chains. Companies that once depended on the United States to reach world markets now reach them through Africa in half the time and for a fraction of the cost. This development triggered a shock most Americans never expected: the decline of U.S. airline supremacy. For decades, American carriers dominated global traffic. Their aircraft filled the sky, branded terminals around the world, and set aviation standards. But hubs are the heart of an airline's power, and when hubs shift, dominance shifts. International carriers saw the writing on the wall and restructured their networks. Airlines in Turkey, Qatar, Kenya, South Africa, Morocco, and the United Arab Emirates created joint scheduling systems that allowed passengers to travel between continents with one-stop connections all outside the United States. Meanwhile, American airlines faced growing inefficiency, rising fuel costs, and congested domestic hubs. Flight delays became routine. Operational disruptions turned into weekly news stories. Investors became nervous. The financial markets reacted just as harshly as travelers. Shares of U.S. airlines began losing value as analysts downgraded long-term growth forecasts. Debt levels increased, expansion projects were frozen, even loyalty programs, once the pride of American aviation, lost their competitive edge when African airlines began offering seamless transcontinental reward systems. Then came the moment that truly shook Washington. Global logistics giants officially reclassified Africa as a strategic aviation region, while downgrading the United States to a secondary aviation region due to unpredictability and aging infrastructure. The shift wasn't symbolic. It meant that international companies would now build their futures around Africa, not America. Inside American airports, the consequences multiplied. Freight backlogs grew. Cargo was diverted offshore. Thousands of aviation workers faced layoffs. Local businesses that depended on airport traffic, restaurants, ride-share services, hotels, tour companies lost customers. Airport cities that once thrived became economic dead zones. Washington scrambled to reverse the trend. Emergency meetings were held, task forces were formed, committees drafted plans, but nothing changed. Aviation modernization required decades of consistent investment, not rushed legislation, and the world was not waiting for the United States to catch up. Meanwhile, Africa accelerated even faster. Robotics replaced conveyor belts. Biometric systems replaced boarding passes. AI-powered air traffic control replaced analog radar. Hydrogen refueling stations were installed for next-generation aircraft. Electric short-hop shuttles connected African megacities. Drone corridors linked agricultural regions to airport processing centers. Every upgrade pushed Africa further ahead and the United States further behind. Global tourism followed the same pattern. Africa became a destination not just for wildlife and safaris, But for business summits, tech expos, music festivals, aerospace conventions, luxury shopping districts, and medical tourism, hotels in Cape Town, Nairobi, and Casablanca operated at full capacity while hotels near major U.S. airports struggled to stay open. The media in the United States desperately searched for a single explanation: foreign competition, government failure, market interference, corporate greed. But the collapse was simpler. Africa evolved faster than America expected, and while the United States was arguing about who should fix the problem, Africa united to solve it. The most painful shift came last. For decades, U.S. airports were symbols of aspiration. People came to America for opportunity, education, business, entertainment, and migration. But now millions traveled in the opposite direction, not because they abandoned the American dream, but because the world no longer revolved around America. Flights bound for Africa became the new way into global opportunity. Africa became the new crossroads of culture, trade, tourism, and innovation, and America became just another stop along the way. When history looks back at the collapse of the United States aviation empire, it won't be remembered as a sudden tragedy. It will be remembered as a warning unheeded, a story of a country that assumed leadership was permanent and discovered too late that progress never waits for those who stand still. Africa didn't steal the future of aviation. Africa built it while America was looking the other way.